It began with a creeping sense of dread. I had heard that my youngest son, Cedro, was sick, and then I hadn't heard anything. Now, like a lot of 20-somethings, Cedro is often not great at getting back to mom on text and phone. But this silence felt different. I texted him one evening before bed, and in the wee hours that night, I woke up and I could not get back to sleep. I gripped my phone, my eyes wide open, as if my very sense of determination could make him respond. At a more reasonable hour, I texted his brother Jack, who lives with him in southern Florida, 1,500 miles away from my home in Wisconsin. These two brothers have lived together forever, and yet they're like two planets operating in separate orbits. So Jack was not exactly a font of useful information. I don't know, he's sick, I guess. That night, I barely slept, and by the third day, I was vibrating with dread. My partner and I did our weekend errands, and I texted Cedro as the sun in the afternoon sunlight was blinding me in the passenger seat of the car. I was willing him to respond. When he didn't, I barely let the car come to a stop in the garage before jumping out and running in the house to call his brother. Jack, you have got to go in his room. You've got to wake him up and find out what's going on. Jack went into Cedro's room as I asked, and I felt every mile between us, all 1,500 of them, as I waited to hear what was happening. I listened in, feeling every mile, as I heard Jack say, "Dude, Cedro, dude, wake up. Mom's on the phone. She wants to know what's going on." Cedro said something I couldn't hear. What did he say? He said he's cold and he can't move. Ask him if he's eaten anything today. He says he's eaten half a bagel and an apple, but he doesn't remember when. My heart sank. Jack got a few more details out of him. Cedro had had a positive COVID test a couple weeks before, and after the first initial intense illness had passed, he just kept getting weaker and weaker. We've got to get him to the hospital somehow, I thought. Getting him to the hospital seemed like a reasonable response, but not like 911 getting him to the hospital, right? I mean, is it an emergency if he's been like this for days? While I looked for flights to Florida, I asked Jack if he could figure out how to get Cedro to the hospital. I called medical transport places. Nobody answered. I called the local COVID testing clinic, see if they had any advice. They didn't have any. And I called the non-emergency police number. Also, they said, call the places I'd already tried. Jack didn't drive. I was in Wisconsin. Their roommate, soon to be ex-roommate, didn't want to transport a sick Cedro in his car. So we struggled to come to the decision that this was an emergency. I told Jack to call 911, and I looked up flights to Florida. While I was doing that, with one hand, I had Jack still on the phone and instructed him he's got to get his brother out of the bed and get him dressed. The report back was not good. He says he's too weak to stand. He can't put on his pants. He says he'll try again tomorrow. Tomorrow? Hell no. I had a ride to the airport and a flight purchased by the time the EMTs came down the stairs with Cedro to their ambulance. I don't remember a lot about the trip to Florida the next morning, except this. It was June 2021. And there had been a lot of stories in the news about unruly airplane passengers making scenes. Scenes about mask wearing. Scenes that turned into fights. Fights that got planes diverted to unexpected airports so that the troublemakers could get escorted off. I boarded my plane like a mother bear, my shoulders wide, my eyes blazing. Over my mask, I looked at every passenger around me in turn. My message: this plane is getting to the Fort Lauderdale airport in one piece and on time. Fucking go ahead and try some shit and I will take you down myself. That's all I remember about that trip. Cedro had been in the hospital almost 24 hours by the time I got to Florida. The nurse's station wouldn't answer, but eventually Cedro texted me. He was still feeling quite weak, but they had put him on oxygen and he was improving slowly. They diagnosed him with post-COVID pneumonia, and he was not allowed visitors. For the next 5 days, I called the nurse's station every day. No answer. I called random phone numbers in the hospital, got put on hold, got hung up on. And in the absence of real information about my son's situation, I had only occasional texts from Cedro. When he started feeling a little stronger, he started inviting me to play Scrabble on our phones. And it wasn't much. I couldn't see my boy. But with each play of the game, I felt a moment of connection, another moment that he was alive. I kept myself busy doing piles of laundry and cleaning the boy's house. Cedro's bedroom was like a COVID-19 archaeological dig site. This was not the home, though, of some remote and ancient people. This was the space that my beloved son had spent 2 weeks of his life suffering, mostly alone. There was that plate with the half-eaten bagel and the apple core, the last thing he had eaten, who knows when. The wastebasket overflowed with tissues. There were empty bottles of over-the-counter cold medications that he had tried. There was a long receipt from Walgreens. When had he left the room? And most heartbreaking of all, a wristband from the ER or urgent care where he had tried to get help. And what? I didn't know. It crushed me to see the signs of his struggle all over this room. He had tried so many things to get help for himself by himself. The boys are good now. But this incident reminds me of some other time in our lives when we all lived in Milwaukee together, and Jack was very sick, the flu or who knows what. And he took the city bus from his college apartment to our house to crash on the couch. He didn't need anything from me except to watch over him while he slept. And it stuck with me, that idea of just being there for each other. The importance of staying alert to each other's conditions. It's how we keep each other alive. Thank you.